if they had a freer system, the everyday people would have more jobs. And I would say people that are unhappy in Bahrain, can they leave? Can they come to the US? Can they go to other countries? Absolutely not. We've got all sorts of restrictions on them. We wouldn't want to force them to leave, but unhappy people often like to go someplace else. Now their options are to go illegally to Europe. So you'll find that millions of people in the Kurdish territories would like to leave and go to Europe and get work for a couple years or for longer. Policies that allow them to do that would be the best way for the Kurdish territories, I would argue, to become prosperous. Yeah.
So if I'm hearing you right, with regard to Bahrain, the hardline off-labor regime that is controlled there, if that regime were to take a step backwards as it were in its control of the economy, that would be a move forward, as it were, for Bahrain.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, I don't claim to be an expert on the Bahrainian economy. I would encourage you to look at the Freedom Index and see what the issues are. But usually people protest for a reason. Now, some are radicals, communists, Islamists, or whatever, but generally the argument would be that everyday people don't have access to incomes, to jobs where they can make money and buy a house. Now, you know, we have protests here. People protest for all sorts of reasons, so you have to sort things out. But that would be my argument, is continuing to free the economy would make things a better place. Yeah, you know, and I don't have an answer to that. You know, I've got my cell number if the president wants to call me and ask me for my advice, but chances are he won't. I don't have an easy answer, but we have this philosophy or sort of a secular religion that justice or rightness comes from voting. Now, I agree in self-determination. People should be able to vote and have a role in the government and so forth, but when you have voting in ethnic tribal countries, you have problems. So the Sunni government can never allow voting in Bahrain because the Shia are the majority. So if the government had no power, then it wouldn't matter. Switzerland is a great example. Switzerland, you know, everybody can vote, but it really doesn't matter. The government doesn't have much power. Someone told me that the president disappeared in Switzerland some years ago. And like they couldn't find him for 4 days, they finally found him in the morgue. He died and nobody recognized him. Now, I haven't been able to track down that story, but the point of it is that the president doesn't matter because the government has very little power. If you had a system where taxes are low, regulation are low, it wouldn't matter whether Shia or Sunni ran the government. The reason why these people care so much is it really does matter. Because when you control the government, you control the schools. You control funding of education. You control what's get taught. You control welfare, the military, all this stuff. So there's really no solution in an ethnic country that has major government power. People are going to fight over that power. And oil revenue and stuff like that. In Texas, do people fight over who's going to get political power in Texas because of all the oil revenue? No, the government can't get their hands on the oil revenue. It's owned by actual individual people in Texas. So you can take over the Texas government, but you can't get your hands on, I guess the University of Texas has some oil land, and so they fight over that. But beyond, they just kicked the head of it out for doing something the other day. But beyond that, it's a cleaner system. Yeah, yeah. Whoops, sorry. So, yeah. I've heard that the University of Texas head is out. So the video I'm going to play now is a basic economic freedom video that shows you comparing wealthy and poor countries. And let me go back to that. This is like just a 3-minute video.
Imagine you had to live in a country from one of these two lists for the rest of your life. Which list would you choose? If you're like most people, you would choose A. Let's take a look at why that is. Take Chile and Venezuela. Chile's poverty rate is half that of Venezuela's, and its inflation rate is a fraction of the size. Actually, all of List A appears to be better off than B. Look at income per person. It's 10 times higher on average in List A. But these lists aren't organized by income. They're organized by economic freedom. List A countries have the most free economies in the world. List B, the least free. Across the globe, we see a strong relationship between economic freedom and people's quality of life. For instance, people in the most free countries earn, on average, over 8 times more than people in the least free. The poor earn 10 times more. People in the most free countries are happier. They have better protected civil rights, cleaner environments, and the average person lives 20 years longer. The freest countries also have less corruption, less infant mortality, less child labor, and less unemployment. So if you care about improving people's lives, then you really care about economic freedom. And having economic freedom means your property is protected under an impartial rule of law. You're free to trade with others for what you need and want. Your money keeps its value because your national currency is stable. And government stays small relative to the size of the economy. For years, the US was among the world leaders in economic freedom. But over the last decade, the US's ranking fell, and it's projected to keep falling. The question is, will our quality of life fall with it? If you like this video and want to join the discussion, visit facebook.com/economic freedom.
So there's a number of groups that work on economic freedom. The Wall Street Journal and Heritage Foundation have one index. Another one is Cato Institute, Fraser Institute, and 50 other institutes around the country. There's also the World Bank Ease of Doing Business Index, which is important, and there's the Freedom House as an index. I'm running out of time. There's a couple short videos on Arab Spring that I think are valuable, and I'm going to play just a brief segment from it. This, yeah.
What do you think the justification is for the government to overregulate the economy of any country?
Well, they're trying to protect people. If you don't have regulation of food and drugs, people could sell any kind of food and drug. So they have stories of people selling drugs that are dangerous or food that is dangerous. So those are the arguments. Now, the private sector does those things through underwriters' laboratories and other sorts of groups that are involved in safety. But it's a belief that the government has to do more. This is part of the progressive era enthusiasm for making the world a better place. And the argument is that shortcuts to try and do that caused unintended problems. Yeah. Israel is much higher in the economic freedom index, and if you look at the economic freedom of the Arab world, well, it wouldn't be in the Arab world, would it? But it's on the overall economic freedom, and you can find where it is compared to other countries. I think they couldn't include it with the Arab world index, otherwise nobody in the Arab world would read the rest of the index. So I'm going to play a segment. You can order Locked Out from isit.org online. It's a 17-minute video. I've got the whole thing, but I'm just going to show 2 short clips of it, and I can leave the video here if you want to show it later. But it's like a couple minutes. These are previews that are online.
In January of 2011, fiery suicides shattered the uneasy calm of marketplaces across the Middle East and North Africa. It all began when a desperate young businessman named Tariq Mohammed Bouazizi was ejected from the marketplace by the authorities and set off a series of revolutions that would become known as the Arab Spring.
200 million Arabs on the street protesting against the status quo. And either these people, who are the overwhelming majority, because we're talking in hundreds of millions, are included, or you're looking for trouble.
Most observers see only a fundamental battle between conservative Islamists and those who seek a more liberal and secular government, and that battle most certainly exists. But the ongoing events of the Arab Spring are driven by a much more fundamental force, the basic right of all people, long locked out of the economic and social system, to earn a living free of government corruption and repressive regulations. Locked out, the roots of the Arab Spring.
There's something called the global economy. It's creating prosperity. And Bouazizi and his like have not been included. They feel excluded. This is what it's about.
So again, you can order that. It's free for teachers, so your parents are a teacher, I guess, and you can get a free copy. There's other videos as well by DeSoto that look at the same theme. The next one just shows a couple more minutes from this as well.
December 17th, 2010 dawned cold and windy. Layla Bouazizi, his sister.
مشى خرج الصباح كيما كل يوم عبى السلعة متاع الخضرة متاعو وكل شيء وقصد ربي نهارت يعني جمعة الصباح معناها هز الشريول عباه بالخضرة ومشى يخدم.
He obviously has some kind of a personal conflict with a policewoman and two government officials from the municipal government who want him off the streets.
يدور في البلاد في وسط البلاد وكانوا يمنعوا فيه ويعطوه برشا عديد الخطايا.
الأعوان التراتيب ضيقوا عليه ياسر وما عملوش فيه الباهي وماهوش كان هو وحده معناها هو الأكثرية مع برشا من زادة من التجار الأخرى اللي تبيع.
And they many times would go up and try and take some of the vegetables away or some of the fruit away, like as if it were a special tax. That kind of thing always bothered him enormously. But in this case, they took all his stuff away.
جاتو هذه العون التراتيب هذه منعاته يعني باش يبيع في الغادي.
What was taken away from him was what he had on his cart that day, which were crates of apples, crates of bananas, crates of pears, and scales.
هزت له معناها سلعته كل شيء جت باش تعدى الميزان حب يحمي الميزان نتاعو ماكل الميزان هو اصلا مش نتاعو ميزان الكترونيك ماهوش نتاعو.
So what DeSoto says in this, the explosion across the Middle East, some people wanted representative government and voting and things like that. The majority of people wanted access to a legal system that wasn't corrupt so they could just do business because people were normally harassed. And in interviewing people that had set themselves on fire, like 60 people set themselves on fire, most of them survived. None of them said anything political about the reasons they did it. They just felt that they had a right to try to earn a living for themselves and their family. So this narrative of Arab Spring in the Middle East is a different narrative than we often hear, that they wanted to vote, they wanted democracy, they wanted this and that. So this is just the economic freedom focus, and the hope is that people get a wider understanding of it, and we try and figure out what we might do policy-wise to promote larger degrees of economic freedom in the Middle East. So I'm out of time. Thank you very much.